Howdy, Dante here. Today I will be discussing how to install Windows Subsystem for Linux, or WSL, as well as Ubuntu, which is a particular distribution of Linux we'll be running within WSL. We will then discuss the Windows Terminal application, which is a better way to interact with Ubuntu WSL on Windows 10 devices. In the next video, I will discuss the installation and basic setup of VS Code. Essentially, this will be the stuff that you are required to do if you're going to use VS Code, which I strongly recommend because it integrates very well with WSL. The next video will be discussing installing Fiora code, as well as a lot of VS Code extensions that aren't necessarily required, but they will make the VS Code experience much nicer. And it is with these extensions that I will do the fourth and final video, which is the planner tool, which was developed by Alex Bourne, one of the TAs, and a demonstration of how to pull down one of the assignments and open it up in code and start working with it, as well as how to submit the assignment. Okay, so that's the overview of everything that we're going to be covering, and I'm ready now to begin with part one. So part one is going to be installing Windows Subsystem for Linux. This is going to involve restarting, so make sure that you bookmark this video or something, or like it so that you can come back and visit it later. But the video, we're going to be restarting our computer during one of these steps. So we can't do the simplified install, we're going to have to do the manual install. So I click that, and it brings us down to the manual install section. So we're going to need to open up PowerShell as an administrator. So let's do that first. So we'll go to our start menu and type PowerShell. And if I click this little arrow, I can click Run as Administrator. It gets the user account control that asks if I'm sure I'll give it permission. I'd say I do. And now we have our administrator PowerShell. Now what I want to do is I want to click copy, and that copies this command, and I can go over to PowerShell and paste it. So this command is going to enable the ability for us to use WSL1 and potentially in the future WSL2. Now we actually need WSL2 for this course. WSL1 is not on its own sufficient. So by running this command, we're enabling WSL1, and we're going to be able to enable WSL2. So step 2 here, checking for requirements. You should already meet these requirements. I'd be surprised if you didn't, but you can update your Windows machine and you'll meet them for sure. When it comes to step 3, we need to enable the virtual machine feature. So again, in PowerShell Administrator, so I hope you kept the window open, we're going to paste the next command, so we'll grab that, and this one we need to restart afterwards. So I'm going to delete no restart and run it, and then as soon as this command finishes, it'll ask yes or no to restart. If you hit Y, your computer will immediately restart. So make sure you save your work and close it, and I'll be with you shortly. Okay, my computer has finished restarting, and I have pulled open these tabs again so that we can take a look at them. So we've just finished step 3, where we restarted our machine after running this command. So now we're on to step 4, and this one's really quick. So what we'll do is we'll just click on the download link here for this MSI package. So MSI is a Microsoft installer, and what it's going to do is it's going to install the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel is what powers Linux systems, and we're going to be running Ubuntu, which is a Linux system within Windows here. So this kernel is absolutely required to make it work. The next thing is we go to step 5, and we're going to tell WSL that we want to use WSL2. So we'll open up PowerShell, which is, the Windows control system, and we'll paste in WSL set default version 2. And that says every time we set up WSL, we're going to use version 2. So I can finally close out of PowerShell, and we're done with that. And we're actually done with this guide. So now we're going to go to the Get Ubuntu page. All of these links are in the description, by the way. So if I go to Get Ubuntu, the page here has this Get button. If I click on it, it asks if I give it permission to open the Microsoft Store, and I do. So that opens up this little app that you have in your taskbar, and it gives us the option to install Ubuntu. Now it says that I already own it. Yours may say Get, so you may have to click Get. It'll ask you to sign in regardless. If you are already signed in with a Microsoft account, you won't see this. It'll just install, which is good. But if you're not signed in, you'll see something like this. All you have to do is wait just a little bit and then click the X, and Microsoft will think that you signed in. So there you go, little trick there to get past that. So this will be helping us install Ubuntu. Okay, so let me click Launch, and this will launch the Ubuntu program. Now it says installing this may take a few minutes. They're not kidding. On your laptops and computers, it should be relatively fast, but on this machine, I've noticed that it takes a really long time. So while that happens, let's multitask. I'm going to go out and get the Windows terminal. So similar page to before, Windows terminal, we have this little get button. I'm going to click that. And we open up the Microsoft Store. We have Windows terminal. So I'm going to go through the same procedure of, faking Microsoft out a little bit. So I wait a second, and then I click. Boom. So now we're going to be installing Windows Terminal. So what is Windows Terminal? Well, this window for Ubuntu, we can actually use once it's done installing to interactively work with our Ubuntu system. We can type all of our commands into it. It'll print all of the text here. But obviously this is not ideal. The font's very small, very ugly. It's not very good. So Windows Terminal will give us a better experience. So let's, for instance, open up Windows Terminal because it's now installed. And in fact, I'll pin this to the taskbar so that we can quickly access it. So by default, Windows Terminal comes with PowerShell, Command Prompt, and Cloud Shell, and it's also getting Ubuntu because we have installed it. So let's go and change some settings so that we can customize the way this looks. So with Ubuntu, we'll tell it to use, for instance, Tango Dark. You have a lot of options for color scheme. And I'm going to use the font Cascadia Code because it's a font that I really like. I'll up the font size a little bit, and I'm going to set acrylic on, which is transparency, and I'll set it to 90% transparent. So now that I've saved those settings, we can tweak some of the other ones because Ubuntu is still installing. So this is a really great way to interact with your kind of programs on your computer. So for instance, we'll just keep switching these fonts around. There we go. And I will enable acrylic as well on these and set them up to 90 just because I like it, and it's something to do while the Ubuntu is downloading. In the meantime, you can spend a lot of time, watching YouTube or whatever while the Ubuntu sets up. Again, yours should be a lot faster than mine. I'm currently running this system in a virtual machine. So this isn't actually my computer. This is a computer within my computer. And the virtual machine takes a really long time to set up WSL because WSL is itself a virtual machine. So this is a virtual machine inside of another virtual machine. So it's really slow. But now that I've configured all those settings, PowerShell's blue, and it's also slightly transparent. So for instance, I can fiddle around with it. But it looks like we finally got our Ubuntu. So let's give ourselves a username. You want to type in your name here. I'm going to type student. And then come up with a password. It should be something that you can remember, right? It doesn't have to be very secure or anything like that. This password's only ever local to the machine. It never goes to the internet. So I'm just going to set mine as pass, which is very short and sweet. And now our Ubuntu is set up. So we don't need this anymore, so we can close it. And we'll go back to Windows Terminal, and we'll specifically tell it we want the Ubuntu. So here we are in Ubuntu. And by default, it's taken me to mount, C, users, and then the user for the Windows account, which is student. That's the same thing as going to the Windows File Explorer and clicking this PC, C:. So that's the mount C, and then we're in the users folder and the student folder. So this matches these. If I type ls, I get the list of all of those files. So in Linux, a lot of the time we want to work in the Linux file system. So the Linux file system starts with /home. And in this case, the username that I typed in was student because I just typed that in the Ubuntu window whenever I set my password. So let's go there. We can cd to change directory. And if we don't type anything, it automatically takes us home. Home is represented by this tilde character. And I can type pwd to see that I'm under home student. Okay. So now that we're here, we've just got one last step before we're effectively done with Ubuntu setup, and you can move on to the next video. And that step is, what we're going to do is we're going to need to update our system and install some basic packages. So sudo apt, sudo, by the way, is really super user do, so it's often pronounced sudo by people who really care. I'm awful, I just pronounce it sudo. So we want sudo apt update. This goes out to the internet and checks for updates. And then if we say and then a backslash, it says run this next command if this previous one succeeds. So this one says sudo apt upgrade -y. That says go out and install the updates, right? And -y means that it's going to automatically confirm. There's no kind of prompt saying, hey, are you sure you want to install? It's just like, yep, I'm 100% sure. And then sudo apt install a few programs. So build-essential is a really important program. It gives you G++, as well as a lot of other ways to work with C++. We also are going to want Git, which is a tool that will allow us to download code from the internet, and it will be really, really, really important for a lot of our assignments here. So if I click enter, it's going to ask for my password, right? So I set mine as pass, but I hope you set yours as something a little better than that. So what it's going to do right now is it goes out and it fetches all the updates from these different websites with all those little GET requests. So it took us 7 seconds to get the updates, and now it's installing them. So it's installing them relatively quickly, and now it's extracting them. So it's taking the things that it downloaded, the updates that it's downloaded, and it's actually performing them on my system so that I am fully up to date. And then it asks, are you 100% sure you want to install this build essential stuff, which comes with GCC, which is G++, so that you'll be able to work with that. And we also asked it for Git, which should be somewhere up in here. I'm not immediately seeing it, but I know it's there. So if I click enter, because it's a capital Y, that means it's the default option. So it'll assume, yes, I do want to continue. You could also press Y and click enter or tell it yes, or N and click enter and tell it no. And by running this, it's going to go and install all of those applications as well. So there we go. That is effectively done. It's just finishing up real quick. And there you go. That is our install and original setup of just the Ubuntu system for dealing with C++ at Texas A&M University. In the next video, we're going to be talking about downloading and setting up Visual Studio Code for working with C++ through the Ubuntu system. It integrates very nicely with Ubuntu. So I hope to see you then. Please leave a comment if you have any questions about this process at all, and leave a like if you enjoyed it. Feel free to share it with your friends if you think it could help them. All right, see you in the next video.